Laurel Jean Mitchell was a 17-year-old girl from North Webster, Indiana, whose life was tragically cut short in August 1975. Laurel was the middle child in the Mitchell family, with an older brother named Bruce and a younger sister, Sarah. She grew up in North Webster, a small town in Indiana where, according to her sister Sarah, safety was generally taken for granted. The Mitchell siblings were raised in a close-knit family environment, with parents Richard and Wilma Mitchell providing a stable home life. Laurel was described as a very nice, easygoing person dedicated to church. This portrayal paints a picture of Laurel as a kind-hearted and spiritually grounded individual. Her commitment to her faith was evident in her involvement with church activities and her participation in a traveling singing group. She had recently graduated from high school and had ambitious plans for her future. She intended to attend Ball State University to major in business. On that fateful evening of August 6, 1975, Laurel Jean Mitchell was working her shift at the Epworth Forest Church Camp Snack Bar. The camp, situated on the north side of North Webster Lake in Kosciuszko County, was a familiar place for Mitchell as she frequented the area for church. As her shift came to an end around 10 p.m., Mitchell left work, declining a ride home from a friend. Instead, she chose to walk, intending to meet her friends at the nearby Adventureland amusement park. The park was only about half a mile away from the church camp, a distance that would have seemed manageable and safe in the small, close-knit community. The route Mitchell took led her through Epworth Forest. Witnesses later reported seeing her walking in this area, which would tragically be the last time she was seen alive. What should have been a short, uneventful walk turned into the beginning of a horrifying ordeal. As the night progressed, Mitchell failed to arrive at the amusement park to meet her friends. More alarmingly, she did not return home. The Mitchell family had a strict midnight curfew that Laurel was known to adhere to without fail. When she didn't come home by curfew, her parents, Richard and Wilma Mitchell, became increasingly worried. The concern quickly escalated into fear, and at 4:16 a.m. on the 7th, Richard and Wilma filed a missing person report with the Indiana State Police. This swift action by her parents set in motion a search that would end just hours later. At approximately 10:30 a.m. on August 7th, about 18 hours after Laurel was last seen, two fishermen made a grim discovery. They found Mitchell's body in the Elkhart River, specifically in the Mallard Roost Wetland Conservation Area in Noble County. An autopsy was promptly performed to determine the cause and circumstances of Mitchell's death. The findings were both tragic and alarming. The medical examiner concluded that Mitchell had drowned, but the circumstances surrounding her death were far from accidental. The autopsy revealed clear signs that Mitchell had fought for her life and engaged in a violent struggle to survive. The evidence of a struggle was apparent in the condition of Mitchell's body and clothing. Her blue jeans were found inside out, unbuttoned, and unzipped, suggesting a violent assault had taken place. In addition to her jeans, investigators carefully preserved all of Mitchell's clothing and belongings found on her body. These items included shoes, a sweatshirt, a bra, underwear, and silver jewelry. The meticulous preservation of this evidence would prove crucial in eventually solving the case decades later. As the investigation continued, authorities began piecing together the events of that night. They learned that Mitchell had been planning to meet friends at the Adventureland amusement park. This information helped establish a timeline and potential route that Mitchell might have taken. Investigators also gathered statements from local residents who had noticed unusual activity on the night of August 6th. One witness, Catherine Flynn, reported hearing a loud car turn around next to her property around 10 p.m. More disturbingly, she recalled hearing voices saying something to the effect of, "Let's get her." Another local resident, Frank Overmeyer, corroborated the report of a loud vehicle in the neighborhood, possibly identifying it as an Oldsmobile Cutlass. These witness statements, while not immediately leading to arrests, would later prove valuable in corroborating other evidence and testimonies that emerged over the years. The mention of an Oldsmobile Cutlass in particular would become a significant detail as the investigation progressed. Based on the evidence gathered, investigators concluded that Mitchell had been abducted while walking from her workplace to meet her friends. They believed she was forcibly taken to the Mallard Roost public access site, where she was assaulted and ultimately drowned in the Elkhart River. Despite the evidence collected and the efforts of law enforcement, the case quickly went cold. For decades, Mitchell's murder remained unsolved, leaving her family, friends, and the entire North Webster community without closure. In 2019, a significant step forward was taken when Captain Kevin Smith of the Indiana State Police, who had been tirelessly pursuing leads in the case for years, made a crucial decision. He submitted some of Mitchell's clothing, which had been preserved since 1975, for DNA testing to the state laboratory. This decision would prove to be the catalyst that ultimately cracked the case wide open. In February 2020, the efforts of the Police Laboratory Division bore fruit. They generated a certificate of analysis that revealed a crucial piece of evidence. A male DNA profile had been developed from Mitchell's clothing. However, the DNA evidence alone was not enough to solve the case. It needed to be corroborated with other forms of evidence and investigative work. A critical component of the breakthrough came from witness testimonies. 3 individuals who were teenagers at the time of Mitchell's murder came forward with crucial information. These witnesses provided statements that linked 2 suspects to the crime based on incriminating remarks they had reportedly made about Mitchell's death over the years. One of these witnesses was Renee Sexton. In 2013, Sexton came forward with information. She recounted that in 1975, when she was 16 years old, she had gone on a date with John Wayne Lehman. After the date at a party, Lehman allegedly made a startling admission to her. He confessed that he and his friend, Fred Bandy Jr., had committed a crime. The details Sexton provided were consistent with the known facts of Mitchell's murder, lending credibility to her account. Another key witness was Bill McDonald. In July 2014, McDonald, who had been a high school sophomore at the time of the murder, told police that Fred Bandy had also confessed to the crime while at a party. McDonald's statement not only implicated Bandy, but also corroborated the alleged involvement of Lehman, further strengthening the case against both suspects. These witness statements were crucial in reviving interest in the case and providing investigators with new leads to pursue. The combination of the DNA evidence and these witness statements led investigators to focus their attention on Fred and John, who were 69 years old at the time. With these new leads, investigators took a significant step forward in December 2022. They approached Fred and requested a DNA sample. The results of this DNA test, received on January 13, 2023, revealed that Fred Bandy was 13 billion times more likely to be the contributor of the DNA found on Mitchell's clothing than any other unknown person. This scientific evidence provided an incredibly strong link between Bandy and the crime scene, giving investigators the concrete evidence they had been seeking for decades. Investigators concluded that John and Fred had likely used Fred's Oldsmobile to abduct Mitchell and transport her to the Mallard Roost public access site in Noble County, where they allegedly drowned her. With the compelling DNA evidence and witness statements in hand, prosecutors felt confident in moving forward with charges. In February 2023, nearly 48 years after Mitchell's death, Fred Bandy Jr. and John Wayne Lehman were formally charged with her murder. Gretchen Harrington was a kind and gentle-natured 8-year-old girl living in Marple Township, Pennsylvania in 1975. She was the daughter of Harold Harrington, who served as the pastor of the Reformed Presbyterian Church. The rest of her main family consisted of her mother Ina and several sisters, though the exact number is not specified. Gretchen was a regular attendee of the summer Bible camp jointly held by Trinity Church Chapel Christian Reformed Church and the Reformed Presbyterian Church. She typically walked to the camp with her sisters. However, on the day of her disappearance, she was alone due to a recent family event that required their attention. Fast forward to the morning of August 15, 1975, a tragic event unfolded. Gretchen Harrington left her home to attend a summer Bible camp, a journey she would never complete. This day marked the beginning of a nearly 5-decade-long mystery that would haunt the community and law enforcement alike. Gretchen set out from her home at approximately 9:30 a.m. It was a routine she was familiar with, as she had been attending the Bible camp program regularly. The young girl was last seen walking along Lawrence Road, wearing distinctive homemade clothing crafted by her mother. The Bible camp program was structured so that children would start their day at Trinity Church for opening exercises. The Trinity Church was led by David Zanstra, who was a family friend of the Harringtons. After these initial activities, the children were supposed to be transported to the Reformed Presbyterian Church, which is where Gretchen's father was, for the remainder of the program. This arrangement meant that Zanstra was one of the people responsible for ensuring the children's safe transition between the two locations. As the morning progressed, concern began to grow when Gretchen failed to arrive at her destination. At approximately 11 a.m., Harold Harrington learned that Gretchen had not made it to either of the churches. He immediately reached out to David Zanstra and his wife Margie, both of whom were involved in the Vacation Bible School program. At 11:23 a.m., David contacted the Marple Police Department to report Gretchen's disappearance. This call, made at the request of Harold, officially initiated the missing person case. In an era before cell phones, social media, or the Amber Alert system, information traveled through a network of concerned neighbors and friends. Robert Jordan, who was 9 years old at the time and attended the same Bible camp as Gretchen, recalled the moment the news reached him. He was playing in his backyard when he was asked, "Have you seen Gretchen?" The search was extensive and involved hundreds of volunteers from the local community. Police, firefighters, and civilians combed the area looking for any sign of the missing girl. The search efforts extended into wooded areas, parks, and neighborhoods surrounding Marple Township. During the initial investigation, a critical piece of information emerged. Witnesses reported seeing Gretchen speaking with the driver of a vehicle on the morning of her disappearance. The descriptions of the vehicle varied, with some witnesses describing it as a green station wagon, while others recalled a two-tone Cadillac. This discrepancy in witness accounts would later prove to be a significant factor in the investigation. As days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. The community, once bustling with search parties and alive with the sound of people calling Gretchen's name, grew quieter. The initial shock gave way to a deep-seated fear and a loss of innocence for many in the area. Parents became more protective of their children, and the carefree atmosphere that had characterized the suburban neighborhood was forever changed. The grim reality of the situation became apparent on October 14th, 1975, 2 months after Gretchen's disappearance. A jogger in Ridley Creek State Park made a horrifying discovery: skeletal remains that were later identified as those of Gretchen Harrington. The location where her body was found was several miles from where she was last seen, in a wooded area of the park. The discovery of Gretchen's remains transformed the missing person case into a homicide investigation. The medical examiner's report, while confirming Gretchen's identity, could not determine the exact cause of death due to the condition of the remains. This lack of forensic evidence would prove to be a significant hurdle for investigators in the years to come. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, law enforcement intensified their efforts to find the perpetrator. They conducted numerous interviews with local residents, including David Zanstra. During his October 1975 interview, Zanstra denied seeing Gretchen on the day of her disappearance. However, in a detail that would later prove crucial, Zanstra was able to provide an accurate and detailed description of the homemade shorts Gretchen was wearing that day, despite claiming he hadn't seen her. The investigation also revealed other disturbing incidents that had occurred around the same time as Gretchen's disappearance. A childhood friend of Zanstra's daughter, later identified in court documents only by her initials, reported that she had been assaulted by Zanstra during sleepovers at his house. This information, however, did not come to light until many years later. The same witness also mentioned in her childhood diary an attempted kidnapping of another girl in their class. She wrote, "Guess what? A man tried to kidnap Holly twice. It's a secret, so I can't tell anyone, but I think he might be the one who kidnapped Gretchen. I think it was Mr. Z." This diary entry, written shortly after Gretchen's disappearance, would prove to be a crucial piece of evidence decades later. However, nearly 48 years after her disappearance, a major breakthrough in the case occurred. On January 2nd, 2023, investigators received crucial information that would ultimately lead to the arrest of David Zanstra. On this date, law enforcement officials interviewed a woman who had been childhood friends with Zanstra's daughter. This individual provided a startling account that shed new light on Zanstra's character and past behavior. She revealed that she had frequently attended sleepovers at the Zanstra home during her childhood, as she was best friends with Zanstra's daughter. During one of these sleepovers, when she was approximately 10 years old, she experienced a traumatic incident. She recounted to investigators that she had awakened to find David Zanstra grabbing her in the groin area. This revelation was shocking in itself, but what followed was equally disturbing. The woman stated that when she told Zanstra's daughter about the incident, the daughter's response was a matter of fact. According to the witness, Zanstra's daughter replied that, quote, "He did that sometimes." This casual acknowledgement suggested that such behavior from Zanstra was not an isolated incident, but rather a pattern of abuse that was known, at least to some degree, within his own household. And back to that diary entry I mentioned earlier, it provided a contemporaneous account that linked Zanstra to suspicious activities around the time of Gretchen's disappearance. It offered investigators a new perspective on the case, one that came from within the community and close to Zanstra's own family circle. Armed with this new information, investigators decided to confront Zanstra directly. On July 17, 2023, a team traveled to Marietta, Georgia, where the 83-year-old Zanstra was living and still working as a pastor. Initially, when questioned about Gretchen's disappearance, Zanstra maintained his innocence, just as he had done in previous interviews over the years. However, the situation changed dramatically when the investigators confronted him with the evidence provided by the woman who had accused him of childhood sexual abuse. Faced with this information, Zanstra's demeanor reportedly shifted. In a sudden turn of events, he began to admit his involvement in Gretchen Harrington's disappearance and murder. Zanstra admitted that on the morning of August 15, 1975, he had been driving his green station wagon when he saw Gretchen walking alone. This corroborated earlier witness statements from 1975 that had reported seeing Gretchen speaking with the driver of either a green station wagon or a two-tone Cadillac. Zanstra confessed that he had offered Gretchen a ride, which she accepted. In his confession, Zanstra revealed that he had driven Gretchen to a wooded area. After parking the car, he asked the 8-year-old girl to remove her clothing. When Gretchen refused, Zanstra admitted to striking her in the head with his fist. He stated that Gretchen was bleeding and he believed her to be dead. In an attempt to cover up his crime, Zanstra said he tried to conceal Gretchen's body before leaving the area. The breakthrough in the case also shed light on some of the inconsistencies in Zanstra's previous statements. In October 1975, when initially interviewed about Gretchen's disappearance, Zanstra had denied seeing her on the day she vanished. However, investigators noted that he had been able to provide an accurate and detailed description of the homemade shorts Gretchen was wearing that day, despite claiming he hadn't seen her. This detail, which had seemed odd at the time, now fit with his confession that he had indeed encountered Gretchen that morning. Trooper Eugene Trey, who conducted the interview with Zanstra, observed that the elderly man seemed relieved after making his confession. Trey stated, "I don't know if he's sorry for what he did, but this is a weight off his shoulders for sure." Following his confession, Zanstra was taken into custody in Georgia. He was charged with criminal homicide, murder of the first, second, and third degree, kidnapping of a minor, and possession of an instrument of crime. The arrest and charges marked a significant milestone in a case that had long been considered cold.